All right, welcome to another deep dive. You guys send in some, well, really interesting stuff this time, and today we're going to unpack it all. We're talking about, I guess you could say, what makes us attractive to each other, and maybe even some of the stuff we don't always talk about when it comes to relationships.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at this collection of sources, it's pretty clear that we've got a lot of ground to cover. We've got everything from practical tips on how to present yourself to deeper discussions on attraction and even intimacy and, well, a few things that really made me raise an eyebrow.
Okay, so right off the bat, we've got this video about low-value items that can supposedly make you less attractive.
Yeah.
Some of it was pretty obvious, like nobody wants to see your clothes covered in lint or pet hair. That just screams, I don't pay attention to details, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like a basic level of, showing you care about yourself, right? It's a
Yeah.
visual cue that definitely impacts first impressions.
But then it got kind of interesting. Baggy boxers were apparently a huge no-no. The video was all about rocking those boxer briefs, and then there was the Apple Watch thing. They suggested that wearing one might make you seem, well, not very adventurous. What did you think about that?
I thought it was pretty funny, actually. I mean, it just shows you how even the most random things can get loaded with all this social meaning. Like, who knew a watch could say so much about you? But it kind of makes you think, right, about all these assumptions we make based on appearances.
It really does. And the video went on to talk about dirty baseball caps, ill-fitting clothes, that kind of stuff.
Mm.
The whole vibe was very much dress sharp, look put together.
Yeah, it's like the message was intentional style is attractive.
Right. And I think that's because well-fitting clothes, they kind of suggest that you're self-aware, and that in turn makes you look more confident, which a lot of people find attractive. So then we have this short clip about dangerous habits that apparently kill your chances with someone.
Yeah.
It was brief, but it seemed to be saying that there are things we do, maybe without even realizing it, that can turn people off.
Absolutely. It suggests that attraction isn't just about how you look.
Right.
It's also about how you behave and how you interact with the world around you. And I think that brings up a really important point. Self-awareness. Do you know how your actions are being perceived by others?
Totally. Now, switching gears a bit, one of the sources was all about natural ways to prevent erectile dysfunction. It focused on exercise, like lifting weights to boost testosterone, and also the importance of sleep.
Interesting, right? Because it directly links our physical health to a really important part of our, sexual function. And that obviously plays a role in attraction and intimacy. It even goes into the science of it a bit, talking about blood flow and nitric oxide, which is like key for those blood vessels to do their thing.
Right. And they touched on diet, too. It's a good reminder that attraction isn't all about the superficial stuff. Our health and how we feel on the inside, that energy really projects outwards.
For sure. If you feel good, you're probably more confident and have a more positive vibe overall. And that in itself is attractive to a lot of people.
Okay, now, this next one really made me think. It was this video with a pretty bold title about how some women treat attractive, masculine men. It felt like it was relying on a lot of stereotypes, suggesting that when women say things like, I'm down for whatever, they actually have very specific physical expectations.
Hmm.
What were your thoughts on that?
I have to say, I felt a little uncomfortable with that one. I mean, it felt like it was trying to paint this really narrow picture of how men and women interact. And it was putting a lot of emphasis on physical aspects to the point where it felt, honestly, a bit objectifying.
Yeah, exactly. It's like he was trying to decode some secret language, and not in a good way.
Right. And, talking about attraction and desire is important, but it needs to be done respectfully. We should be celebrating the complexity of human relationships, not reducing people to just objects.
So moving on, we have this video titled 63% of Young Men Are Single Women tries to explain why. It brought up a lot of different possible factors, like men feeling belittled in relationships, women trying to change their partners, and the impact of growing up without a father. It felt like it was trying to look at the bigger picture of why relationships might be struggling.
Yeah, I think this video is trying to tackle some pretty big societal issues. And some of those points about feeling belittled or pressure to change, they highlight how important communication and respect are in a relationship. The need for both partners to feel accepted for who they are. And that bit about fatherless homes, that's a big conversation in itself.
The presenter also talked about how frustrating it is when the conversation always focuses on what men need to do differently without acknowledging that women might need to change too, or even just questioning if the way relationships are structured right now is actually working for men.
That's a really important point. You can't really talk about relationship issues without looking at things from both sides. It's not about blaming one gender or the other. It's about understanding how our individual behaviors and, society as a whole impacts these dynamics.
Then we had a shorter clip arguing that if you're too agreeable, it can actually make you less attractive to women. Basically saying that having your own opinions and maybe even being a little assertive can be more appealing than just saying yes to everything.
I mean, that makes sense. Right. We often talk about how confidence is attractive, and part of that is knowing yourself and what you believe in. If you're constantly agreeing with everything, it can make you seem like you lack conviction, and that might not be the most engaging quality in a partner.
Yeah, it's finding that balance between being considerate and also being your own person. Now, this next one was really specific. It was a video called Clitoral Mastery, Get Her to O Every Time. It was a whole 6-step guide on how to stimulate the clitoris, starting with gentle, indirect touch, and then going through all these techniques like focusing on the clitoral legs, the hood, using your tongue, and even pulling back the hood. It was very detailed.
It was definitely a deep dive into that particular aspect of intimacy. But I think the important takeaway was the emphasis on being gradual and trying different things, being really sensitive because, as they said, it's like the eye, and it really encouraged communication. Pay attention to your partner's reactions, talk to each other. I thought that was really important.
Absolutely. It was saying that taking your time and being curious can be more effective than just going straight for intense stimulation.
Exactly. It's like a reminder that sexual pleasure isn't one size fits all. It's about taking the time to understand your partner's body, their responses, and being open to feedback. And that communication, it's key for both people to have a good experience.
We also heard from someone who moved from the West to Eastern Europe, and they had a lot to say about the differences in dating and relationships between those cultures. They talked about the whole idea of princess treatment, which they defined as doing thoughtful things for someone based on their love language, and even shared a story about a woman who identified as a strong feminist, but still seemed to appreciate a more traditional gesture of a man paying for a date.
I think that story really highlights how our personal desires and deeply ingrained societal norms can sometimes be in conflict with our consciously held beliefs. It's fascinating how these things can clash, especially when it comes to relationships and expectations. And, the whole chivalry debate ties into that too. Like,
Right.
what's the role of traditional gestures in a modern context?
Right, it's evolving. They also talked about what they found cringe about Western dating, like guys using these self-important titles or asking super direct, almost impersonal questions. They contrasted that with Eastern Europe, where it seems like people are much more upfront, even asking about past sexual partners early on.
Yeah, and it just shows how what's considered appropriate or attractive really depends on the culture you're in. What might seem awkward in one place could be totally normal somewhere else. I mean, that directness in Eastern Europe, some people might see it as refreshingly honest, while others might find it way too forward.
They also had some strong opinions about what makes someone attractive, emphasizing ambition and the effort of providing as being more important than just being wealthy. And there were some funny observations about differences in physical appearance ideals and even driving habits.
I think that's important. It's about what's underneath, the drive, the effort. That's what can be really attractive.
And their advice for dating in Eastern Europe: be prepared to drink.
Which maybe says something about their social culture. Right. It's a lighthearted comment, but it speaks to the importance of understanding local customs, especially when you're navigating relationships in a different culture.
We also had a video from a self-proclaimed dating expert who had a pretty intense message. He was basically telling men to escape now,
Yeah.
suggesting that Western women are all about seeking validation and have unrealistic expectations. It was a pretty negative view of women in the West.
Yeah, that was a tough one. I think it's important to remember that those are just his opinions based on his own experiences. And, generalizing about an entire group of people, it's never productive. It can be really hurtful.
Totally. It felt like he was pushing this idea of finding love outside of Western cultures, which is a pretty big contrast to some of the other perspectives we've talked about.
Yeah, it just goes to show that there's a whole range of opinions out there about relationships, and it's up to each of us to find the perspectives that resonate with us, and most importantly, that promote respect and understanding.
Then we had a video that asked the age-old question: do hot women go for nice guys?
Hmm.
It didn't really offer a straight answer, but it acknowledged that this is a debate that's been going on forever.
It's this classic struggle, right? The nice guy versus the bad boy. And the truth is, it probably depends on the individual woman and what she's looking for. It's definitely more complicated than just a simple yes or no.
For sure.
Yeah.
Following that was a video about how to make someone obsessed with you overnight. It had all these techniques like using your gaze, the power of silence, subtle touch, mirroring their body language, and even the influence of the color red. It felt like a whole playbook on manipulating attraction.
Yeah, it was all about using psychological tricks to basically hack someone's attraction. Some of those things, like actually listening and being genuinely interested, those are good communication skills, right? But
Yeah,
some of the others felt a little, I don't know, manipulative. And I think it's important to be aware of the ethics of these tactics because building a real relationship, it should be about genuine connection, not just playing mind games.
totally. It felt very calculated, like it was all about getting a specific reaction.
Exactly. And while it's interesting to learn about psychology and how people work, at the end of the day, a healthy relationship is about authenticity, respect, and genuine connection, not just using a bunch of tricks.
Okay, then we had some excerpts from a Q&A with a guy who calls himself the Insecure Virgin and talked about how he gained confidence. He shared his journey of overcoming shyness and anxiety by basically learning how to be more social and changing his mindset. And he was pretty critical of some of the more extreme stuff you see online, advocating for self-improvement instead of blaming others.
It was a great example of personal growth.
Right.
He took control and decided to make a change. And I like that he emphasized both the internal work, mindset stuff, and developing actual social skills because you need both to succeed. And that bit about setting boundaries when someone's disrespecting you, that's crucial too.
Absolutely. He was basically saying that confidence is important, but you also need the practical skills to back it up. And knowing how to protect yourself in social situations, that's huge.
Totally. You have to be able to navigate those dynamics.
And lastly, we had some advice from a self-proclaimed orgasm queen on how to have consistently amazing sex. Her big points were starting with non-sexual touch to build intimacy, talking openly about what you like and don't like, and taking the pressure off by not comparing yourselves to other people or past experiences.
I thought that was really insightful. That idea of starting with touch, it's about building that connection and intimacy before things get sexual. It releases oxytocin and creates a sense of closeness. And that thing about having a menu of small offers, it just takes the pressure off and allows you to explore what you both enjoy at a pace that feels comfortable.
Oh, that was a great way to put it.
Yeah, it's not about rushing to the finish line. It's about enjoying the journey together. And she really stressed how important it is to talk to each other, to avoid blame and judgment. If something isn't working, you have to be able to communicate that in a way that makes both people feel safe and heard.
And that advice about not comparing yourself to others, that really stood out to me. It's so easy to get caught up in what you should be doing or feeling, but ultimately it's about figuring out what works for you and your partner.
Absolutely. Comparisons just lead to insecurity and resentment. It's much healthier to focus on your own needs and desires and communicate those openly and honestly.
So wow, we covered a lot today. From subtle signs of attraction, even if one video just wanted you to smash that like button, to the unexpected connection someone made between a tech watch and, let's just say, a certain bedroom preference.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about how things like your clothes, maybe ditch those baggy boxers, and even how much sleep you get can affect how attractive you seem to others.
We really did go all over the place. We explored different ideas about relationships, respect, and how men and women interact. We heard arguments that being too agreeable might actually make you less attractive, while emotional consistency could be a key factor. And we even got a glimpse into how dating and intimacy can look different in other cultures, from the directness of Eastern Europe to the more, let's say, nuanced expectations we see in the West.
It really makes you think, when we talk about attraction, are we mostly focused on the superficial stuff, like the low-value items video suggested? Or is it about something deeper, our confidence, our emotional intelligence, and how genuinely we present ourselves to the world?
And I think one of the biggest questions we're left with is how do we balance presenting our best selves with being authentic? How much of what we project is really us, and how much is shaped by what we think other people want to see? And is it better to be consistently honest, even if it might seem predictable, or to cultivate a sense of mystery, which can definitely create a different kind of intrigue?
It's something to think about. Each of these topics could be a whole deep dive on its own, but we hope this conversation has sparked some new ideas and perspectives for you. Maybe even go back and revisit some of the sources we talked about and see what else you discover. It's all about understanding ourselves and how we connect with others, which is a pretty fascinating journey.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.